Good evening, chess friends, or good afternoon, depending where you are. This is International Master Valeri Lilov, and welcome to today's broadcast on YouTube. Today we're going to be talking about the middle game and how you can master it. I'm going to give you some fundamental principles on how you can master the middle game. Before that, I'd like to know if everybody can hear me all right and the sound is actually working. If you can hear me, then that means we can get started. So, can you guys hear me all right? Just confirm on the chat. Let's see. Is there any sound coming through? Okay, so I got one confirmation. I need another confirmation that the sound is actually solid, so please let me know. It's okay. Okay, I do hope you can hear me well because I'm using a professional microphone and it's got to have no problems. Clearly, it's fine. Thank you. Thank you. So, what we're going to be talking about today. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about a couple of things. Now, the first thing is I'm going to give you methods. I'm going to tell you exactly how and what you need to improve on in order to get better at middle game. Now, let me clarify the middle game for you. What is middle game? Middle game is that stage of the game in which you already have the pieces developed, or at least the most of the pieces developed, and you're starting to think of how to win the game. You can begin an attack, you might begin improving, or you may just want to do something else, whatever it is. The important thing is to make sure you know the right patterns, the right principles in the middle game, so you can be successful. So let me show you a few special examples that are from my very recent course on mastering the middle game that iChess have actually released. It's a fantastic course of 19 hours of training that you might actually get at a 60% discount with the link that I just sent you on the chat. Also, you can check it out below the video. But out of that, I've shown some incredible examples, and I want to bring up a few of these with some instructive elements that will help you to get your middle game to the next level. So we're going to start with the game that was played by Vasily Smyslov. Now, Smyslov, as some of you might know, was one of the greatest players ever. He was a world champion. He was an incredible positional player. Smyslov in this game was played versus Gideon Stahlberg in the Zurich Candidates Tournament. It was a World Championship Candidates Tournament, 1953. The game basically started with e4, e6, d4, d5, and knight c3. So as black played with knight f6, white played bishop to g5. Now you got to know one thing about the middle game. A good middle game never happens just by itself. It's always a product of a fine opening. And remember, I say a fine opening. I don't necessarily say an incredibly successful opening. Because when you go on with a fine opening, usually you get a decent development, solid control, and by itself it suggests that it is successful. Now, keep in mind that I use the word fine opening because successful opening in many people's vocabulary means I got to be checkmating my opponent or do something as cool and great. And that's just unrealistic. It's important to know that all you need to do in the opening is to develop your pieces fast, make them as advanced as possible, and fight for the center. 3 simple things. Do you need to learn a lot of theory? No. Do you need to know some theory? Yes, because you want to know exactly where and why the pieces are going and how to construct a better position, a better center. But if you follow these 3 guidelines, you should be able to have a fine opening that will set you up for an even better middle game. So in this case, black played d6. It's not my personal favorite system, although a lot of people play it. I have to say that. And now we get into a very typical pawn structure. Now, pawn structure is, I think, the connecting link between the opening and the middle game. And one of the reasons is because a specific pawn structure determines what each player is going to be fighting for in those two stages. Like, so basically, in this case, we could see that black is going to be fighting for a chance of playing c5 to counter white's middle, and white's major goal is going to be to support, to sustain his center, and further on go ahead with an attack, maybe on the king side or so on. So that's basically what each player is fighting for. Now we're still in the opening stage, so going on, white exchanged the knight with the bishop. He didn't want to give away his strong centralized knight. The position isn't closed, but the book rule of having bishop better than the knight, just if the position isn't closed, it just isn't true. I think that it always depends on what the pieces do comparing to one another. Like now the white knight is just superior to the black bishop. And in the long run, I don't feel like this bishop is going to find much future there. So anyway, black plays knight d7. And here's my first question to you guys. How do you think white must develop, and where do you think he's got to go right now? I want you to take a moment and think about this before we go. Like, what do you feel white must go now? What white must do now? Bring me your thought or suggestion, and I'll tell you if you're in the right direction or if there is something that you haven't figured out properly. So what is white's best possibility now? You know, talking about good strategy, I'd like to point out that good strategy often relates to one thing. Making sure, yes, it's a good thing to consider going for bishop to the d3. There is a move of queen to the I like that. So we can definitely do that. No problem. It's good. It's good. But there is something else that we need. Okay, just think about that. Develop your pieces close to the center. Developing the pieces close to the center isn't just a nice idea. It is a principle. Now, when you're studying the middle game, I'd like to clarify what's the difference between principles, rules, and concepts. Because a lot of people think that they're the same thing, and they're very different. Principle is something that you should always use, no matter what. Now, that doesn't mean that there is no exception, but the exceptions are rare, very rare. Like, works in 90% of the times, or 95% of the times, and we have only 5 to 10% exception. Then we have the rules that are known, like, for example, a principle is always try to keep your pieces in the center, or close to the center. Now, that is a principle. Now, a rule is, for example, make sure that in the opening, you keep your pawns in the middle because they're stronger and more solid. And eventually, when you get more prepared, you like to use your pieces because they can attack through the center. Now, that's a rule. Why? Because it may or may not actually happen in a certain position, but in most of the times it happens. Like in 80% of the times, we get the rule working. Like the rule of trying not to exchange a centralized piece for another. Now, it's a rule. That means at some point we can exchange that bishop if we see a good, very good reason, but 80%, we shouldn't do it. And then, okay, we have the concepts. The concepts are suggestions. They work in 65 to 70%, which is a pretty good percentage. So what is a concept? Concept is something that, heavily depends on the concrete circumstances, although in most times it has to be followed. Like a good concept is try to avoid backward moves. Backward moves are now no good. Now that really depends whether the piece could actually maneuver to a better place from that backward position, and so on. But it's important to know these three, and how you can distinguish them very easily. Principles are the things that always work, or at least in 90 to 95% they work. Rules also work in the highest percentage of times, like you've seen it and you know, Like, for example, don't exchange good central piece for another one that's not central. You know that it's right, but it still depends. There is this chance that it depends. It's not always working. And then there's the concept, heavily dependent on the concrete circumstances, and yet in most circumstances, they work the way they said. So, for example, avoid backward moves. Okay. Now, in this case, white follows the principle. He brings more pieces closer to the center. It's important to distinguish these three because that helps you to learn them. Principles you learn by just understanding how they are. Rules, you simply try to see the situations when they actually happen. And about concepts, you try to figure out the reason behind them. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that, but let's go on with the game. White plays queen e2, knight b6, bishop to b3, bishop d7. So there's a question now. I got to ask you, what do you think white should do now? Do you think that white should castle short? Do you think you should castle long? Here's another good question. Think about that. It is a very, very important question. We could have done a lot of moves, but I want to know, what would you guys think? Now, don't tell me moves. I'm not so interested in moves. I'm interested in the reasons. Now, I see a lot of people give me moves. Now, I like moves, but, it's not very helpful. What I think is helpful is if you tell me reasons. Even if it takes you a moment to write down your reason. Write down a small reason, and that will do well. Long. Okay, long. Why long? Why is long castle? Reasoning for... Okay, here we go. See? One sentence, but it helps me to understand why you want to do that move. Long side castles to fight for d5. That's fine. But you see, d5 is already available to black. I mean, in a way, if we castle short, we could also put the rook on d1 and go c4. So I think that it has to be connected with the king's position. Long side castles, because it adds protection to the center. Good point. But we can also add protection to the center by playing short castles, right? So is there any specific reason? So that the rook has more open file? Yeah, but, basically, we can do the same thing with short castling. The both rooks have space. Long, because white has piece majority on the king side and an attack. Yes, that's a good point. Because we could start an attack, and we have piece majority. Very good point. Thank you. That's a good explanation. But I really like the last two suggestions. Thank you. See, that's what I need. When you're suggesting something, give me reason. Don't just say to move. Tell me this because of that. Could be short, to the point. Short castle is safer, and short castles because black's pieces are all pointing towards the queen side. Very good points. Thank you. Thank you, guys. I couldn't say it better. In this case, white has a better control. Now, when you have space advantage or any kind of advantage, one of the things that you want to do is to make sure it's safer. That means you don't want to put yourself or expose at risk. If white did castle on the long side, black would have played a5, and most likely he would have actually started some challenges on that area, or possibly pushed the bishop c6. Now, of course, we got hg4, g5, but do we really need it? Do we really need to put ourselves at such a risk, given that we already control the middle and we have superiority in the minor versus, like all the black pieces? No need. That's why white played the move of short castle. Very good. Thank you. Now, black plays queen e7. White continues with the development, setting up both rooks on the d1 and e1. And this is the moment where black plays bishop a4. So this is where we actually get to the late middle game. In the early middle game, in the opening and the early middle game, we're developing and setting up, and that's good. That's very good. But we get to the point where there is a more specific need for something. Now, that's not easy to define what, but what to do now. Black has played to move bishop a4, hoping to exchange and get ready, or probably play for c5. So I'd like you to tell me, I'd like you guys to let me know, what is white supposed to do here? That's a great question, by the way. It's a really, really good question. So I need to think. Think carefully and tell me. Now I can exchange, or you can just stay and allow black to do the exchange. Now that'd be fine, because then we can retake. Bishop takes a, b3, and c4. Not bad, I suppose. What you're even though you didn't mention any reasoning behind it, I suppose that you want to just control the d5 square. That's not a bad idea. That's not a bad idea. Anybody else with any specific reason of why do you think you should be exchange or should white not exchange? Take your time. This is more of a training session. So white is more developed in black attacks without reason, so white should think to punish. Maybe bring the rook to the d3 to defend the rook and develop at the same time. Defend the bishop. Those are some nice comments. Thank you. Let black trade. Here's the thing. We want to let him trade so that we don't bother ourselves. But if he does, we're going to get weaknesses. Okay? And this is a bit of an unnecessary risk. Now, see, with the very moment white castled short, he wants to make sure he avoids any unnecessary risk, even chances. So right now, we could just take with the very same idea that I got in the beginning. What white needs to do is to try and punish black, but more importantly, he needs to restrict him. So there is the change, and there's even queen to the b8. So that's important. Now, if white allowed black to trade, yes, maybe white would have played c4 and everything, but he can still play c4. The more important thing is we don't want weaknesses. Okay, so remember that. This is a big thing. We don't want weaknesses. We don't want to give the opponent any hope for salvation. So right here, right now, we're good to go. We're good to go, and we're going well. We're going really well. See, that's how you make it work. It's simple, it's beautiful, and it's effective. It's just the way it's supposed to be. And so, in that way, in that manner, white is starting his own deals. So it's a really interesting opportunity to go for it. See, don't go for anything that may actually cause complications or tactics of any kind or whatever it is. Keep him longer in the bad or in a more difficult position. So now after c4, you can see that black's position starts to progressively get worse. And that's very good. Now you're probably going to think, okay, what is white's major goal now? It's to restrict. Now that doesn't look like anything special. But now the more black stands in this bad looking situation, the more he's going to have to worry because of everything that he will have to endure. So step by step, white's position looks brilliant. That's how you do it. Step by step. So, going forward, after queen b3, black played with queen c7. Now, you didn't know what to do. And that's another thing that I wanted to tell you about. When you're playing, no matter your opponent's level, if you get to hold him in a bad or a challenging position, the longer he stands there, the bigger the chance is that he'll make mistakes and that he's going to make blunders. And right now, that's exactly what happens. He didn't know what to do, and so he started making mistakes. So there we go. He played the move of queen c7. So how do we handle this now? How do we play this? Anyone? Take a moment and think about it. Knight takes bishop. Good call. Of course. Creating the weaknesses. Now, once he's got the weaknesses, we already have something important. We already have a great opportunity to keep the opponent a little bit more backward and behind. How could it get any better than that? It's perfect. It's a very, very good idea. One of the big things that we'd like to be doing in such a position is to really keep the opponent a bit more on the backside and a little bit down. That's great. It's simple, it's effective, and it works. Well, that's all we want. Now, there's more stuff that we, of course, want too, but I mean, right now in this type of position, we can see that with the double pawns on f6 and f7, he's got problems. So yes, let's go for it. Rule number one about about these positions is just stand strong and let it grow. Let the position grow enough so you can actually create the weakness. You can create the possibility that will help you to begin a significant plan. So what we actually have is develop, improve, continue to improve, look for a possibility to create a weakness, prepare to attack the weakness, win the weakness, and then go on to win the game. Damn, that looks hard. Man, it looks bad. I want something fast. I've actually heard that many, many times. Doesn't work. What you see in tactical books is the finale. You see the beautiful 5-move sequence out of 45 that came before that. Standing strong is one of the biggest techniques that you're going to learn in the middle game, because the most important thing is making sure that our opponent doesn't get anything else but a difficult position. So now after the exchange and the recapture, we have already gotten ourselves in a very strong state to move forward. So there we go. After the move of bishop takes f and then pawn takes to the f, then what does white do? Anybody? So, anyone? c5 to attack out there. Actually, I agree with that. But then black will play with knight to the d5. He's going to step in the center with the knight. I don't like that. Queen e, of course, it's the queen in e3. We need that. Getting the queen out there helps us out to put it on h6. Keep the opponent a little bit on the dark. We can have f6 challenged, and that's the way to go. So brilliant, nice, and easy. He had to do king g7 in that moment, just so that he can avoid that queen moving in. I mean, imagine what would have happened after knight x to the c4, queen h6, there, and then there is the move of rook to the d3. There's a very strong knight g5, rook h3 idea, or knight h4, and so we could see the power. So what black has to do is to play king g7. He's got to deliver the defense that is so much necessary. So he does do that. Now what do we do? What about a4 first? We could have done that, but I think that what white wants to do is to keep the attack going on that area. Now b3, possibly. That's not a bad move. Now one of you said, my problem is that I look for tactics after 10 moves. Yeah, don't do that. Remember, it's a build-up, a lot of build-up. Some call it boring. I call it strategy. After all, the game of chess is a game of strategy. Tactics appear as a result of that strategy, not otherwise. Now, sometimes they appear out of the opponent's blunder or mistake, but that's not under your control. Sometimes he will, sometimes he won't blunder. Most people who are good are not going to blunder. So, now, what do we do? Knight g5, not a bad idea. Not a bad idea, but white figured out something else. You see, if you put the knight on g5, he ain't going to take it. If he does get to take it, you're going to take and then win material. So that's true. But we don't want that move. There's a better opportunity here for white. A stronger move. Something that's going to make more pressure to black as opposed to just that knight jumping out on g5. Think more. What else can white do at this point? Queen e4 is not too bad, and rook e3, but again, you started giving me moves, and I don't want just moves. There's so many moves I can't comment for each of them. So tell me reasons. Why would you do this move or not the other? Tell me the move, the reason behind your move. You said h4. I got 3 h4s. Why? I suppose it's because you want to have that pawn going to h6, but then he's going to go back and play rook g8. Not even. Yes, here is a strong move with a strong reason. See, that's very powerful. If you want me to answer your suggestion, give me the reason behind it, not just the move. The basic mistake that most people do in the middle game is that they think with moves like, oh, I can go here. Is it good? No. Okay, I can go here. Yeah, is it good? No, I can go here. Okay, is it good? See, and that just repeats. It doesn't work like that. Think of the idea, what you're looking to do, not intuitively picking it up, but purposefully saying, okay, what's my goal in that specific situation? Knight e5, bring up the rook on the third rank, covering the g3 with the queen. See? Here's a good logic. Here's a good reason. Moves without reason are nothing but just pure possibilities. Nothing more. They don't work. Think about why am I playing that move? See, this is one of the biggest questions that nobody asks. At least if you ask 9 out of 10 people, why do you play that? They'll tell you, oh, it looks good. It does. But does it have any meaning? So after that, White played knight g4. So you're probably wondering what would have happened if Black took it. Well, if he took it, that would have been a forcing checkmate, most likely, with rook e4 and the unstoppable rook g4 or rook e3. So he couldn't do it. He played queen e7, knight g4, and rook g8. So where is White supposed to go now? That's pretty interesting. We got a very nice looking knight. We have the black king that's just a bit exposed out there. And, okay, so where do we go next? Why not knight d2? Because it would have been passive if you played knight d2 anytime earlier. It wouldn't have worked out. Queen h6 to limit the king? Sure thing. That's a good one. But if we just limit the king, we're not really going to limit him. We're just going to push him back, take, and rook g7, and he's going to protect that pawn. So that doesn't bring anything to the table. We need a different idea. I wouldn't answer to moves alone, just to tell you. Tell me the meaning, and then I will comment on it. If you just tell me, oh, check, nope, I'm not going to comment on that unless it's very, very important. Queen h6, he doesn't take the queen, no, because after queen h8, king h8, he'll play rook g7. He'll stabilize. So, no, that doesn't work. Double attack on, you can do this, but then if you do it, check there, takes rook g7. He'll stabilize. Now, maybe it's not perfect, but it's stable. So I don't think that it would work too well. What else can we do? What else? Rook d3, bring more pieces, not a bad idea. I totally agree. But I don't think that it's the best idea. Anything else? See, you need to be focused on the king side. So being focused there means that you need to consider only moves that relate to that area. Like knight h6, for instance. Thank you. You didn't bring any suggestion of why that move should be played, any explanation, but that's okay. If Black plays rook f8, then what we can do is to concentrate on knight f5 check. And that's pretty painful. If he does go for queen c7, we can take that rook. And that just looks just as painful. And you see White's killing Black already. Not because of some big tactic or whatever, but because we could realize the danger. The danger of knight f5 plus knight takes g8 just comes out as a final break of all that buildup that took place up to that moment. 22 moves. Who would like to finish the game in 22 moves? And yet it ends here. Black's got to defend the queen. So now we take the rook, and we play with stabilizing b3 that keeps everything together. King h8, queen h6, rook g6, queen h4, knight d7, rook a3. And then after queen a5, we got rook to h3 as a move. Not f8, and then rook to the g3. And what's so great about this position is that we've got the attack against the g6, we've got the threat against the f6, and we have the black king being under a very severe attack that just keeps him backward as much as we could. So it's a beautiful move that seems helpful, strong, and effective. It works out like a charm. Then black obviously played with queen takes a2, rook takes g6, knight takes g6, we take on the f6, and then black does a move king to the g8. So up here, white simply solidifies the position with a move of queen f3, and then we have queen to the d3, and that's great. Strong, simple, and winning. Well, that's it. Now, one of you asked, why did black have to give up his exchange? Because he couldn't defend both the rook and the knight f5. He would have lost the queen due to the pin that we create. So really, that's it. So what is the most interesting thing that helped white to become so successful out of this? First, it starts with the idea of developing fast, closer to the center, and making sure our pieces go on the most advanced squares. Second thing, make sure that the middle game begins with preparation. Not with an attack, with preparation. It's like in a battle. If you're a sniper, you have the right gun and you have the right bullets. What do? You don't just move and start shooting. What you do is you prepare. You calculate the wind. You measure the distance. And you take the shot when you know there is a hard target to hit. Okay? If you don't do it, you're just going to waste ammo. And you're not going to hit anything. The most important is to get ready. And that doesn't mean just getting the guns and the bullets. That means you've done the first part. Now it's about preparing yourself and getting ready for the shot. That's what preparation in the middle game means. So a lot of it is taking the time to build and build and build and build. It doesn't work in one move. You may have the gun and you may have the bullets. But if you want to hit the target right in the middle, you must take the preparation. That's all. It's not checkers. A good point. Thank you. And one of the great ideas is that we only attack when there is a weakness. Until that point, we actually can prepare a possible attack. Boring, but true. And that was great. So I want to build a wall. Who wants to build a wall? Black can't build a wall right now. No. So king g7, there it is. The knight and the queen. And, just there was knight h6, knight takes g8. So anyway, it was a great example. By the way, if any of you wants me to send you that game, please let me know if you want me to send it together with the annotations. I'll do that. I'd love to do that. You can email me to valeri.lilov@gmail.com or just send me a message to my website, and I'll be very glad to provide you with the annotation on this game. In the meantime, don't forget to check the 60% off Middlegame Mastery course that was released earlier last month. So it's a perfect one, and I think you can learn a lot from it. It's got a lot of interesting concepts about planning and these middle game rules. Now let's talk about another very instructive game that I'd like to share with you. So just give me 1 second. Okay, here we go. Now this next game was played actually by a very famous player. His name was Tigran Petrosian. And it's interesting because we also have a very young grandmaster named Tigran Petrosian. So this was the world champion, Tigran Petrosian, playing actually with the black pieces in this game. So there we go. Spassky Petrosian. Now this game is supposed to be looked at from black side because it's very instructive, I think. And I'd like to share with you what are the really key learning points from it. So Spassky was playing with white, and he started with d4. Then there was knight f6, knight f3, e6, bishop g5, so-called Tory attack, one of my favorite openings for white. Bishop to the e7, a3, knight d7, bishop d3, c5, challenging the middle, c3, b6. White castled short, black played bishop to the b7, and now white plays knight e5, and there's an important choice for black to make. What should black try to exchange in this moment with the knight, or you think that you shouldn't? This is very important. Now, one of you said, okay, so let's see. Okay, you're talking about the previous game. I don't remember the previous one. Anyway, so what is black supposed to do now with the knight e5? So here, let's focus on this game. Black can trade or try to stay away, maybe castle or do something else. In any case, I'd like to know what you guys think, and whether you think you should exchange or not. Now, again, don't tell me moves. I don't want to hear moves. Moves don't mean anything. Remember, that's what I often talk about. I was actually thinking about this like some days ago. Do you know one of the biggest problems, one of the biggest reasons I'd say why most amateur chess players fail as opposed to masters in specific positions? Now, you're probably going to say it's experience, it's knowledge, it's understanding. And I'm going to tell you, I know amateurs who have a great knowledge. In fact, they're so good that they can teach brilliantly, even better than some grandmasters. And yet those grandmasters beat them. Now, there are many reasons why that happens, and why knowledge does not equal skill. But one of the very first reasons why most amateurs fail to be good at that level, that professional level that's strong and advanced and great players are, is because they haven't made the very first step of changing the way they analyze a position. Now, basically, when you analyze a position in chess, there are literally two things that happen. First, you analyze the position by evaluating the features, and two, you calculate the variations. That's how we do it. Now, everybody literally does that. The problem is in the order. You see, with most inexperienced players, or even experienced players who just remain at the same level, the process works. They calculate, and based on that calculation, they find some ideas. The problem with this approach is that even though it makes sense, it is a very limiting approach. There's only a certain number of variations that can be calculated, and we don't even know if these are the right variations. So ultimately, they float around, and they calculate, and they calculate, and they calculate, and then they come up with a limited number of options, and limited number of information and ideas. So ultimately, they choose an inferior move. Now, the way a master thinks is before he starts calculating, he sort of thinks about what is necessary in the position. What are the very valuable features? And based on that, he decides what lines or variations to choose and calculate or analyze. And then he brings the calculation after he has already assessed the position. Now, that sounds like a very simple approach. And it makes sense, right? I mean, who would ever start calculating before you ever think about the consequences and the things and the position? So, I mean, it's like, say, okay, I want to drive a car, and I want to go to that city. I don't need a map. I'll figure it out along the road. Maybe you will, but it's going to take you days until you get there. Now, nobody does that. You think about anything you do, like just anything you do with work, at school, we always plan it, even if it's just a very small plan, an intuitive plan. We always have figured out at least 2 or 3 steps. We have assessed the situation. That's what the reason why is because our minds, our brain is wired to do things like that when it's life. But when it's chess, it approaches chess like a puzzle. And the way we approach puzzles is very specific. We calculate. Think about any puzzle you do on a magazine or so. You may think logically, but mostly you do the calculation part. It's like math. We do the calculation part. We use logic, but it's mostly calculations. Why? Because there's a fixed solution. In chess, there is no fixed solution. And that's the great illusion about thinking, that there is a fixed solution. There's never a fixed solution. When you're looking for a fixed solution, the problem is that calculations can't help you. Calculations are essentially designed to help you figure out a fixed solution. When there's no fixed solution, you fail. You calculate and you calculate and you calculate, and that's the biggest problem. So what you need to do is, because the mind, the subconsciousness, is not going to change in over a day, you have to discipline yourself, and you have to push yourself to analyze and evaluate the position before you begin your calculation. It's a very simple thing, but unless you're conscious of it, you won't do it. And that's the biggest difference between strong and amateur players. I want to answer that question because a lot of people have asked me. The biggest difference between amateur players and strong, experienced chess players lies within that very simple rule of how we process every position in chess. Calculate, evaluate. Masters evaluate and then they calculate. Beginners or amateurs calculate and then they evaluate. And that's why they fail, because they come up with a limited number of things, no matter their knowledge or experience of the game. So it's a very important thing. And now, while I just wanted to tell you that by giving you more time to figure out this position. So knight x to d5, breaking the hold in the center, makes a lot of sense. But did black play it? Yes, he did. Because that's what we need. We cannot allow the opponent to keep these strong and advanced pieces closer to our territory. If we do this, essentially white will just take and maybe play f4, but we're going to exchange that pawn. We're going to exchange or push away the bishop. And so it's a very interesting thing. Knight takes d5, d takes d5, knight d7. Now it becomes a weakness, as I mentioned to you earlier. We need that kind of weakness. So we've created it. And actually after knight d7, there's bishop f4, and now we have queen c7. The biggest problem of a weakness is that somebody has to stay down and protect it. And then sometimes it becomes even more expensive than just one pawn. It's better to lose it, because otherwise it takes away 2 or 3 pieces that have to stay there and defend. So what should black do now? Does anybody have a suggestion? There's queen h5, you said. Okay, that's fine. But if the queen h5 happened, I think that black could just do g6 or something similar very soon. h6, g6. And most likely, or maybe g6 immediately, he would play with the move of bishop g7. e5 needs babysitting and more. It's going to take at least a couple pieces like now to defend it. Why did white not exchange his bad bishop? That's a good question. I think that if he did exchange it, it would have made black's position easier. But I agree. Probably it was better to do this so he can at least use the weaker piece to defend the pawn. Anyway, he didn't do it. f6 we cannot do because of the edicts of discovered attack. So we can't do that. Something else got to happen. Don't give me moves. Once again, moves don't mean anything. Everybody can come up with moves. Give me meaning and I'll comment on that. h6 with a plan on g5 and a kingside expansion. You see? Perfect. Thank you. That's the idea. We have h6. When you give meaning, you almost always find a good move. When you just give a move, it's almost never the truth, because you just think, oh, let's do that. What does that mean? Why? Probably you don't know. And that doesn't work like that. So remember, meaning equals evaluation. And that comes before you even say, all right, I'm going to do this move. So h6 helps out to go for g5. We can bring out the rooks. We can castle. Now what white does is he plays with the b4, as a matter of fact. And then black can play g5. It forces the white bishop to come right down to g3. And then what is black supposed to do now? Is rook g8 slow? I don't think so. No, I don't think it's slow. But what I think is necessary in this position is that we actually find a way or an opportunity to like challenge against him, to threaten him, do something. c4 to advance, maybe that's possible, but we don't really want that at this moment. We want something else. Now remember, begin your plan or your activities with an active move. March. It's April now, but we still got to march. H5. Absolutely. See? H5 is the march. It comes in April. We got H4, and in this case, it was the 25th of April, 1966. See, I wasn't born for another 30 years. And yet, black marched in April. G takes H. If white takes on H4, there's the E5 pawn that comes out. Bishop F4, long side castle. A4, and now black has already won a lot of material, got on the file that he needs, and things look great. So, what to do now? Keep in mind, that's a pretty cool position. We gained the control. We got the space. Where else do we go from this point? Now, while you're thinking about it, once more time, I wanted to give you that link. You can check below the video. It's 60% off my newest 19-hour of training lectures package. It's a brilliant one, and you can take a look at that. I think that I put quite some effort in setting up the most important topics that a player needs to learn and master, so you might really enjoy it a lot. Now, c4 to stop the boot. Keep marching. Not bad, but no, there's a different idea. Well, at least you want to figure out an idea, not a move. Break up the king's position. We can do rook to the g8. I don't mind it. Why didn't the knight take g5? Okay, that's a good question. Because if the knight took the g5, black would have just captured it. Okay, so didn't work. Rook g8, doubling up the rooks. No worries. c4 to keep the line closed. Yes, we're going to get the rooks over to g file. No worries. But we're going to select a move that closes down the position. And that's a perfect idea. Then white plays bishop e2. What to do now? What should black try now? Anyone? Now, sometimes people ask me, Valeri, tell me the best move I should make. And I tell them, there's no answer to that question. But I can tell you the best types of moves you should consider. And the best types of moves are forcing moves, like checks, captures, direct threats, they're great. The restrictive moves, which will limit our opponent, and the reinforcing moves, with which we bring more pieces into play. Now, we have no forcing moves, as there is no attack that we can make. We already made a c4. There's a reinforcing rook g8 that I saw a lot of people suggested to get on the king's side. That I like. But more importantly, we have a restrictive move of a6 that prepares each of the pawns to push the opposite direction, depending on how white plays it. Very important idea. A restrictive move. It's valuable, and it works. Jumps out as a perfect candidate. White plays king h1. Black plays rook dg8. And so what we see, suddenly, is that black's pieces are just perfect. They're coming into play, and things look great. Rook g1, rook g4. Now, I just want you to look at the momentum that black is able to get on the king side. It's that purposeful area of the board where we really get to put all of our pieces into the play. And that's the area where we do it. Queen d2 and rook h to the g8. That's great. Wow. This is this ominous attack on the king side coming in play. a5, b5, and rook a d1. So white said, okay, well, prove it. Prove it. Prove me wrong. So black is good. But he still needs to prove that white is actually being wrong with his play. Now, how do we do that? How do we do that? It's a great question. Anybody? See, this is a really big query here. Bring queen into the game. Not a bad idea. Get the knight involved. Not a bad idea. Not a bad idea. Not a bad idea. Anything else? f6, get rid of the irritating pawn in the middle. I think that's okay. But then white will play e takes f, attack the bishop. I think that all of these moves are kind of risky. See, I think you need to think about the worst piece. You see, I've taught a lot of people, and I've learned from a lot of people. I've learned a lot of different methods. I've taught a lot of different methods. We can talk about attacking, defending, and, improving, regrouping, anything, whatever you name it. You studied it, I probably taught it and learned it first. But there's one method that I believe is more powerful, is more effective than any of the others. Now, what's that method? You probably want to know. And it's actually very simple. It's something that is extremely simple. It's easy to do. It works every single time. And nobody does it because people just don't know it, or they don't care to know it because it sounds insignificant to them. It's the concept of improving your worst place piece. In fact, it's not a concept, it's a principle. When you don't know what to do or you feel stuck, take your worst place piece and get it better. What's the worst place piece? The worst place piece, or sometimes pieces, are those like the bishop on b7, the bishop on e7 that don't do much. Now, sometimes you can't improve one of them, but you can improve the other. Like what black did in here with bishop f8. Super cool. That move holds on to the idea that if black's bishop gets into play, black will have an extra piece attacking there. And more interestingly, he didn't even have to worry, because the moment that pawn falls, the activity of the black pieces is so huge that it compensates every other piece that we had. Centralization is kept forward, and black's amazing position of his minor pieces completely dominates the passive 2 rooks that white's got on the back rank. So here's another question that I want you to answer. Imagine that black has the advantage. He's got everything. How would you further like to advance it? What do you want to do now? Slow progress. It's not slow. It looks slow, okay? But it's not slow, okay? This is very, very important. So what does black do now? What do you think? So what should black do now? So Anybody? Light's bishop's bad. I agree, but we can't open it unless we actually open up white's pieces. H3, that's fine. But what we need is the queen. See, we need the bishop, but we need the queen even more. So black played something similar. He wanted to keep the rook active, get the knight closer to a better position, and more importantly, bring the queen. So it's not about the worst place piece, the worst place. It's often about the worst place pieces in plural form. We take that opportunity, and then after white captures, we play queen takes d6. Now, if white takes d5, black's going to get his bishop into the battle. So white did not want to. He wanted to play rook to d4. But then black advances. And it's so powerful that now black even plays the move of f5 that simply busts open the position. Either white has to take here, which will leave black's 2 pawns amazing. Or if he takes on the d5, which he did, black plays f4, queen e4, and knight f6. That just continues to help black to grow his position as the game progresses. And of course, improve his worst place piece. I can't tell you how amazing is the idea of improving the worst place piece. And the reason why it's so neglected is because it just doesn't seem like it's so special. Everybody says, who cares? It's just one piece. Well, if you're an extra piece, you're just not going to say that, right? The problem is when we're not an extra piece, you say, oh, yeah, but I'm not an extra. Well, you are. The difference between whether your bishop is going to be here or here is huge. Besides the general value of the piece, of whether a piece is 3 pawns or 5, we have the relative value of the pieces. That actually counts their percentage. If it's on b7, it's like what, 30%? If it's on c8, it's 100 because of its value to h3. So you're like getting one more piece. You actually have an extra piece in the game. That's how important it is. Every important piece must get into the battle. Every worst piece must be introduced into the battle. If you do that, and you do that quickly, you will be successful. So now we exchange on the f1, takes, and the only thing that holds white's position here is f3, which would destroy effectively. If white takes, f3 is a killer. Try to defend. And I'm going to let you define the final breakthrough move that black discovered, which killed white's position. Okay, so now you thought, okay, well, thinking about the worst place piece led me to a bad thinking of playing d4 because I thought that the light square bishop was worse. I suppose you're thinking about a position in that kind of situation of d4, like maybe earlier. Well, here's the thing. When it comes to a sacrifice, you got to be careful. The reason why black did the sacrifice and it worked was because he could keep the pressure. This means he held white's pieces behind. If you make a sacrifice and you're not keeping your opponent's pieces behind, I don't care what positional factors you're going to use. It's not going to work. A sacrifice only works in 2 occasions. If you win, or if you can keep a strong pressure. That means making sure your opponent's pieces are behind. The reason why that worked is because most of white's pieces are behind, and the sacrifice is justified, making white's rooks feel miserable. It's a very important thing to know. d4 wasn't a bad idea. It was just a sacrifice without which, you couldn't get the bishop, but with it, you would have got a material down with no compensation, no pressure, no win. So in the end, just have that one move of knight to g4, and that's it. So now basically after knight g4, f takes g4, and white plays f3. There's a rook h1 checkmate idea, yes. So if he plays king g1, of course, the black queen is coming. He plays rook g2, and then black could took it, and white resign. It's obviously rook h2, and the queen is coming. Now, one of you asked, okay, I'd like to know the mistake which caused all of white's problems in the meantime. Well, the major mistake that white did, which caused all of his problems, was the fact that he went up too early with knight a5, and later on he chose not to defend in a simple way. He went on with the bishop, created a weakness, and experienced all the problems out there. So that's basically it. One of the things that you really want to understand is that improving in the middle game takes a lot of practice on learning different patterns and seeing how they work in different positions. This is why oftentimes in my lessons to students, I teach them how a pattern works out in many different ways, in many different situations, until they really master it and internalize using this in their games. But the most important thing in how a middle game improvements begins is by changing the way you think about a position. Not just saying what's the good move and how do I follow it up, but rather saying what are the ideas? What's my plan? What does my opponent threaten? What is my worst place piece? Those questions, properly asked, will become habits. And then if you use them long enough, that will become something you are going to internally be asking yourself in every single moment. So I do hope that you find this lecture useful. Again, if you want me to review any of your games or give you some specific suggestions on your chess improvement, you can always write me an email at valeri.lilov@gmail.com, or just directly send me a message through my website, tagalilov.com. Do not forget to check the 60% off the Middlegame Mastery course. It's only available for a few hours, so it's right on the link below the video. And also, I'm going to post it on the chat just in case if you are here during the actual webinar now. So thank you all for joining. I'm going to have the next webinar the coming Saturday at the usual time, 12 p.m. Eastern. So thank you all, and I hope you have a wonderful Sunday.